Good evening, everyone. This is Keith David, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
All right, and we're back here at the station of decapitation without your head, and I am Nasty Neal. And I'm
Untitled Trista.
Right. I should have mentioned that beforehand, but it's very cool because we're joined by award-winning journalist and horror expert Chauncey K. Robinson. It's very good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Trista, thank you so much for reaching out.
Thank you. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I know. Shriek Fest. And then, I'm pretty sure we're cousins somehow. We have the same last name. That's what I always say every time I talk to you.
I know. We need another family reunion soon.
I know.
So where did you guys meet? You met at a convention or festival, I mean?
Yeah, we met at the horror and science fiction film festival, Shriek Fest, that happens in LA. It's like the longest running horror and science fiction film festival in Los Angeles. So, and Echoes of Fear was what Trista was starring in at the time. So I interviewed her on the red carpet.
Oh, nice. Which is a great movie, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's how I met Trista as well. Not at the red carpet, but because of the movie.
I just make movies to meet people mostly.
Well, I'm glad it's working out for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So we're here to. It's a weird time in the world right now. We're here to talk about an important subject: people of color in the horror genre throughout history, currently, and whatever else comes up while we're talking. So it's cool that Chauncey's here with us to go over this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So one of the things you actually mentioned in the email was just like kind of the history of social commentary within horror, and I thought that was a good thing to talk about because there's an article that was going around that was saying that horror needs new leaders and all these things, but I always agreed with what you said in the email, and you can go into that I think horror, in the most part, is has been good in that subject in portraying people and having social commentary, within the genre.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because I know, a year or two ago, where it was the whole thing where Jordan Peele and other great directors and storytellers were coming about, and people were like, "Oh, this is elevated horror. This is the new kind of thing. Hasn't been done before." But honestly, if you look at the history of horror, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I got into it, as being someone who's like a political journalist, but also like a film and TV critic, it drew me to the idea that there's so much in there from George Romero's Night of the Living Dead commentary on race and gender, and then They Live by John Carpenter and others, where you just have great examples of sometimes overt social commentary and sometimes sort of in there interwoven as well. So it's always been there because it's just such a ripe genre for that, particularly the zombie genre. I feel like they do that a lot when it comes to human existence and what that means. But I feel like horror has always kind of given that sort of social commentary.
Yeah, and I always think it's weird when people, because I do see sometimes people say, I don't want political commentary, social commentary in my horror, and I was like, I don't think you're really paying attention, or really just in or in science fiction, or really any kind of genre, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've heard that too, the whole thing of well, it shouldn't bludgeon me over the head with it. Funny enough when they say that, because it's horror,
Right.
Just this idea of because it's in there somehow. Even something that seems like it's just straight up killing and whatever like that. One of my faves that recently became a fave of mine in the last 2 years, because I saw it for the first time. And I don't want anyone to revoke my horror card, but I saw the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time. I hadn't seen it before.
Wow.
I'd seen all the remakes, and I had finally seen it, and I was because I looked up the background of it, of commentary on the war and whether or not the whole idea of a class of workers left behind who worked in meat packing and things like that. And I watched it and I was like, wow, first of all, it's an amazing film. But then to see some of the themes that you can interpret from it that, sometimes get lost, but it's in there, although it seems like it's a chainsaw wielding maniac, and that's the most of it.
You know what's funny, Chauncey, is so like a lot of people, I'm so angry right now, like most people. And so I'm just like filled with rage all the time. And so when we were thinking about doing this, I was coming at it from a negative space because I've been in such a negative space. And then I saw that email from you that was like, yeah, let's talk about horror and how they've been really great about pushing a social commentary and challenging the status quo. And I was like, like something like a little light in me came on, and I was like, oh, I love horror. I can love something.
Yeah.
Like it was so wonderful to like remember, like, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. We're celebrating that, and that's so important.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, and like you're totally right. Like, it is a very intense time right now, and I think one of the things when a lot of stuff started popping off, the first thing a lot of people were saying was, well, we saw this in a couple of movies that we've seen before, like Where Society Is, Contagion and all that other stuff, and it was kind of like, wow, does horror like foresee like the end of the world or the end of society? But I mean, for me, one of the reasons why I love horror is just the idea of it. It takes somewhat of a warped mirror to society, and sometimes it's not even that warped, but it takes a mirror to society in some ways, and kind of whatever the person who's telling the story chooses to amplify, it does it in a very visceral kind of way. I mean, yeah, blood, guts, and sometimes zombies and ghosts, but I don't know, and I guess that's why I tend to like horror that has a little bit more of a optimism, like with Final Girls, like yourself, and other, like where it's where there's some hope against the monster, right? Where it's like there's monsters in our everyday lives, but the whole thing with horror is that you actually usually get a chance of kind of defeating this, whether it's Freddy Krueger or whoever, of hope, of some type of optimism, which I know is one of the, I do film and TV producer with Rotten Tomatoes, and I know I've had some controversy in some of my thoughts on certain horror movies of recent times that have been to me, a bit too bleak at times when it comes to the human condition, like Midsummer and other things. And but I guess it's my bias because of the fact that I look at horror of, here are these really horrible things, but there's a chance that people can actually overcome them in a way. Which sounds cheesy for the horror genre, but that's actually one of my things of why I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's cheesy, and it's funny because for me, the horror genre is like so much more palatable than the horrors of the world. So I can understand why, as gruesome as it is, having some hope, like there's nothing wrong with wanting to have some hope. I don't think it's cheesy. I hope hope is not cheesy.
Yeah.
What do you think, Neal?
No, I totally agree. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties getting this the watch party up. But it's live. We're just now live on the Without Your page, but we've been live this whole time. So, but I'm sorry. I was sorry if I was looking at my phone. I was just trying to add everything together.
No.
I do think that in general people think of horror as a negative thing, to begin with. It's like you watch these movies because there's you just want to see people get killed or something, and like maybe there is a part of that depending on what kind of stuff you're watching. But I found that most of the horror fans are really positive people, as opposed to like negative people.
Yeah, I think there's been a study or something recently where they said that people who like the horror genre tend to be a little bit more less stressed. Sometimes because of the fact of when you're watching horror, seeing those things happen, going through that adrenaline rush and then kind of flattening out, it's kind of, you get out the pent up energy that you might normally have in everyday life. At least I'm not pulling that out of nowhere. I did read that. Like that was a thing that it's like kind of scientific that if you watch certain things, which totally goes against sometimes the narrative of what the horror genre sometimes, whether it's book form or film, that it creates people who like violence and things like that, which, this study kind of went against that. And, I've just had, in my time, I've always been a horror fan, but in my time of starting to get into it, more publicly with, the projects I've been doing and and been on and with film review and stuff, I've just found it be a very welcoming community. I mean, no fandom is perfect, but I think overall, because of the fact that horror is a genre that tries new things, there's experimentation, and like Trista was saying, like it's so it's so tangible, that you have a lot of people that are not so much with the status quo, if not more so pushing against it when it comes to certain things.
Do either of you know S.A. Bradley by chance? Scott Bradley. He has a book, and I own it, and I hope I'm not butchering the name of it, but I think it's called How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy. And you're right, there's lots of references. It is proven.
Yeah. And even when a lot of this stuff happened in the last 2 to 3 months that have felt like a year, I feel like a lot of us within the horror community were kind of like, well, I've watched a couple of movies that play out just like this, so maybe I'm not as stressed as because I've kind of seen this movie before. I just happen to be in it now. And although there's still, of course, the real life terror, but it's kind of like certain things you start to expect. I actually wrote an article about the way to understand, well, more so the pandemic, is if you've ever watched a horror film, a zombie movie actually in particular, that there's certain elements to it that actually play out. And while I was writing the article, I was like, wow, this is actually, I was kind of joking in the beginning, but it's so the way the human condition, because that's what the zombie genre is kind of about, where it's not so much the zombies all the time, it's how humans relate to the zombies. And one could argue that, the zombies in our case is like this, this virus and whatnot, and how people react, what happens when there's kind of a breakdown of order of the normal. And in a way, we've seen that, but we've also, a lot of us who have watched those kind of movies like Dawn of the Dead and things like that, we've kind of witnessed it before in cinema. So
we're also better prepared, I think.
Yes, definitely better prepared. Yeah. We know what to stock up on and who's going to go crazy first, other things.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just recorded an interview recently with Max Brooks, who did World War Z and the zombie prep. I forget the name. It was about preparing for the zombie apocalypse. And he said, even though those are about zombies, technically when he wrote them, they really weren't about zombies. He was writing about that, being prepared for, either a pandemic or some type of breakdown in society. And, that's really what they're about, as opposed to flesh-eating zombies.
Yeah. And it's actually, it's funny because I recently started this blog, Final Girl Survival, which deals with survivalist preparation, but being inspired by the final girls of horror and whatnot. And one of the things is when I was looking at certain movies and stuff, it was just kind of like this idea of, well, I feel like I've watched so many things. I feel like I would know kind of what I should do if I ever get thrown in a trunk, or if I go in the woods and I break my ankle, how I need to put a splinter. Or there's things that I've actually seen happen. I'm like, well, why?
Not what to do. Don't go in the basement or
don't
go off alone if you're in a group. Right.
Yeah. Things like that. Those are definitely the basis. So, and even, in terms of what's been happening very recently with the racial injustice and the police brutality situations, even then, there have been horror classics of that nature that have tackled that. Even ones that have, newly classic, like a lot of people know Get Out and whatnot. But there's, and Candyman and whatnot, but there's been others, Candyman's coming back, recently. But, there's been others like Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs that dealt with poverty and race, which is one of my, fave films. And just the whole thing of, what we've been dealing with the class situation, people who are the numbers of people on unemployment right now is just skyrocketing, right? And, there are a lot of people who are angry, who are like, what are we going to do? And there's people who are sitting on billions of dollars, and why aren't they being affected, and blah, blah. And we have movies that talk about that sort of elitism and stuff with They Live. The whole question of when John Carpenter made that, he was basically, you know, he said it was kind of an F you to Reagan, right? This whole idea of the trickle down economy does not work. You know, it's like rich people don't get a lot of money and then suddenly benevolently want to give it to the rest of us.
Yeah,
like,
we're finding out again right now. Right? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's coming back around, and that's the beauty to me of horror. Like on days, especially this past week, that have been very stressful for me. One of the things I did, I sat down and I watched Jaws because I just was like, I need something to relax me. And Jaws is like my favorite movie ever. And I don't know, I felt a little bit better. I was like, well, you know, they ended up getting the shark in the end. So.
The film near me, actually, Jaws.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There were a lot of films, I think, around that time because, like you said, with Reagan, there were these different, you know, he was sort of perpetuating this false stereotype of like, oh, welfare
queen and stuff.
Right, yeah, these terrible tropes. And I think that the films in response to those lies were really profound. And I can think of several films that deal with police brutality, like Tales from the Hood.
Yeah, exactly.
For instance, is a fucking amazing movie, and it makes me sad when I think of how long there have been films like that.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's one of the things when if we don't learn from history, like they say, you're bound to repeat it and whatnot. And I guess that is like what you said with Tales of the Hood, like that kind of, you know, film is giving, and what Jordan Peele does with the new Twilight Zone and Get Out, and even Us to a certain degree, just kind of using this genre, this medium, with the film medium in the horror genre to kind of express what's happening, what's actually a very real tangible thing, and its own real life kind of horror. Even on like Twitter, where I normally just like post horror stuff and like some, you know, politics here and there, but I had just been going hard on like what was going on. And I even told people who follow me, I'm like, if you're just not following me for my horror love, just know right now I'm posting nonfiction. Because like what is going on is nonfiction horror, and it's not something that we necessarily should turn away from, because, you know, if anything, the horror community, like I was saying, people on the fringe sometimes, and people who, you know, are about kind of pushing what is normal or what's respected and things like that. And so if anything, this is our time to kind of, you know, step up in a way, because we've explored these topics before, whether overtly or, you know, in a subliminal like manner. So.
Yeah, Brian adds here in the chat room, Brian Evan Bradley, the end of Night of the Living Dead is so chilling because it highlights what we were just talking about.
Yeah. He doesn't get killed by, it's so crazy, right? Like he doesn't get killed by the zombies. He goes through all of that and he ends up getting killed by these two white guys who just shoot him. And it's like, to go that far and then die on something so realistic, it was like, it's so chilling, because it's so, the most real thing that could happen is actually the most terrifying. And Jordan Romero explores that, of course, in that one. So, and this is, you know, back in black and white. So.
Mm-hmm. I always thought it was interesting about, go on, sorry, Trista.
No, please.
I was just saying, I always thought it was interesting in Night of the Living Dead is they don't really talk about him being a black guy in the movie. He just happens to be, but it adds so much to the movie over time. And I think if they would have talked more about it within the movie, I think it could have dated the movie, as opposed to, you know, none of the characters bring it up.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with you. It definitely would have dated it, because it's just, yeah, and that's the thing too, when it comes to casting and things and representation in horror, but any film, where sometimes it doesn't even have to be an overt, like, hey, this character is black, guys.
Yeah, it makes it more powerful.
And sometimes it's like, it's just the idea of the way a character might respond to a particular situation, the way a character might respond to other characters and things like that. The story changes depending on the background, you know, and sometimes it's not as overt, but like you said, like him being black, there are layers that are added that weren't necessarily like bludgeoned on our head with, but it was there just simply by him being a black man in this character. Yeah.
Which I just think it makes a more powerful movie. and timeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I agree too. And Jordan Peele had an alternative ending for Get Out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's interesting that he wound up going with the other ending where his friend helps him. You know, they're both profound in very different ways, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just say, Dawn of the Dead has a different. The original ending is different too, and both similar, where both of them would have ended like on a downer as opposed to a more hopeful ending.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and that's an interesting thing too, and that's one. I guess that's one of the things I do appreciate about Jordan Peele. I appreciate a lot of stuff about him actually, but like with the particular of how the way he chose to Get Out, the way he showed it to the wide audience, and even with us too, where us had a little bit of a twist, but even then it wasn't like anyone from like, it's very, okay, so horror is great. I do say horror great, but there had been a time where Black people just didn't make it out of those movies, right? Like if you had a Black character, a lot of time, depending on what the thing was, they were kind of the first to go. And I think I think the first character who kind of made it throughout a whole horror movie as a Black guy was Kincaid from Nightmare on Elm Street. They killed him in the next one, but I think he was the first one. I think the actor, he always touts that. Yeah, that he was actually the first Black guy to make it to actually survive a horror movie. Right. Yes, and but up to that point, it was kind of like, you know, Black characters died. And one of the things I do appreciate about Jordan Peele is that he, I feel like in a way it goes back to that whole thing of beating a monster, of it being able to be overcome. And he does that with the two films. It's like this idea that we don't see these characters die. We don't see them get brutally killed. The main characters anyway, they kind of make it, which is kind of, you know, subverts a little bit of, you know, a little bit of an overdone horror trope that the Black person usually doesn't get to make it. So I appreciate that about him because, you know, sometimes it's hard, I think, as a, you know, for myself as a Black woman going to certain films knowing I'm like, oh, we're not gonna make this, you know, and feeling some type of way about that when I feel like we're a very surviving bunch.
It would totally change
what we've been through. Yeah. So
it would have totally changed the feeling of Get Out, you know, if the character dies at the end or ends up, you know, in prison for, you know, if it was a down ending, this would have made a much different movie.
And it also depends on who the movie's for, right? Because, you know, sometimes, particularly when they talk about Black issues in films, in horror films, you know, there's a thing of like, who's this film for? Is it to teach those who aren't Black about the realities of it, or is this for, you know, Black people? And I feel like what Jordan Peele was able to do, he did both. It was kind of like, let me like display this to you, because he said, you know, Get Out as a documentary. That's one of the things he says. But also let me show Black people that you don't have to die at the end here. There is, you know, some kind of hope. So I think what he did masterfully was do it for both audiences, where we both audience would get something out of it that was profound.
Mm-hmm. How important? Go on, Citrus. I'm sorry.
No, go on, please.
I was just saying, how important do you think that the fact that movie was so successful, how important do you think that is, you know, to the genre and Jordan Peele and to the movie itself?
Oh, it was totally necessary. I mean, if people watched Key and Peele's their show originally, he would do horror skits like that, and they would be funny, but he'd actually do horror because he was a horror fan. And I think, you know, I guess I felt like it kind of in recent times like opened the floodgates for other people, you know, Black creators who were into horror, because we're there, right? Like we're here, we like horror. I mean, when I was doing when I do my YouTube show and things like that, or just like talk about horror, you know, sometimes I get messages from other young Black women and they're like, wow, like didn't know we were up in here and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we exist, we like horror too, right? Like why wouldn't we? And I think, you know, his movies kind of said, I can make this film, I can make it mainstream, I can make it a big thing, and the main characters are Black, and that's totally marketable, because that's the whole play in Hollywood, right? Like, although it's been debunked, this idea that Black leading characters aren't marketable, but we know that's not necessarily true because studies have come out that they actually are. But yeah, Jordan Peele pretty much helped in that degree. I don't necessarily agree with the whole debate of like, is his stuff elevated horror? Him and Ari Aster, like, is that elevated horror? I think it's horror. Horror is You know, it's like, it's not, what is,
yeah, that post horror, and
I don't know what that means. I feel like that's just people who don't want to admit they like the horror film. I don't know. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, and they talk about like, you know, they don't rely on, you know, jump scares, but I mean, not every movie did either. And
right, exactly.
Yeah.
It deals with the fact that horror sometimes, you know, it's the redheaded stepchild sometimes when it comes to the way people treat it.
When they're up for awards, they still want to get away from the horror title and call it, you know, a thriller or, you know, something other than horror, just so like a horror movie.
They call it Hereditary. Hereditary was like a family thriller
or
something they tried to call it. I'm like, what? Like, people get decapitated in this movie. What are you talking about? Family thriller? What is that?
It's a very strange family, but yeah. What were you going to say, Trista, before? I'm sorry.
Well, talking about Jordan Peele and us specifically, I read something that says Jordan Peele allows Black people to be Black people. And I don't know if everyone agrees with that statement, but it resonated for me when I saw Us specifically, because I love Get Out. I think it's a perfect film, so I was very excited to watch Us. And then watching Us, before anything scary happened, for me, I felt like I love being able to watch an aspirational Black family. Like, that's something I see in my life all the time with my friends, but not something I see on screen as much. And so when I read that quote, I thought like, oh, I feel like that's how I was feeling when I was watching Us. Like, I want to see more of that. Before, and as a horror fan, but that was before anything scary happened, like completely independent of being a horror fan. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. When I did my review of Us, one of the things I felt was the theme that he was challenging was this idea of otherness, right? Like, there's sometimes in, you know, mainstream media, the default is seen as white. And because of the default being white, there's an otherness when you see like a Black family, like a father who's kind of goofy and things like that, and a wife and the kids that, you know, the girl is like any other teenager. And I think he was challenging this idea of sometimes making it seem like this couldn't be the quintessential like American family, even in that line when like the other Us person says we're Americans and everyone's like, what does that even mean? I mean, there's a lot of like interpretation, but this idea of this is, you know, it's not, you know, if it's a Black family, it's not something that's separate and apart from American culture. It is American culture. It's part of American culture. The Black family doesn't have to be otherness. This is a family that deals with the same kind of issues that a family might deal with a teenager that doesn't listen and a son who doesn't, you know, things like that. And I think he challenged to say that here's a regular family. I mean, they weren't necessarily a regular family, but here's a regular family. And this could be your family, and you're not Black, but this could be your family. This could be your husband. This could be your wife. You know, this could be your neighbors, you know? And I really did appreciate that. It's very subtle, but he does it by, like you said, just basically allowing these characters to be who they are, to be Black, but not to be in a way that like a caricature of Blackness, but what Blackness can be. It's not a monolith, but it is, there's variations of it. And this family was a representation of that.
Brian here in the chat, he wants to know, do you have any favorite Black horror filmmakers on the independent scene that people may not have heard of?
You know, unfortunately, like, honestly, Jordan Peele's kind of the main one, because like I said, I am someone who I grew up on like mainstream type horror, and then there was indie stuff, but I didn't really delve as much as I should, and that's what I've been getting into as of late because of, you know, what, like one of the things that Jordan Peele has done. So no one necessarily in particular, but I'm exploring as well. I take, if there's anybody in chat, if they have suggestions for me, I'll take that. So I'm still diving into. I'm exploring. It's always a journey.
Yeah.
I just saw a great little indie short called Hair Wolf. Have you seen
Oh, yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Really, I recommend that. It's really funny. Sorry, Neal, I keep interrupting.
No worries. No, it's good. I was say Justin Price, a friend of mine who makes a lot of stuff. He's a good filmmaker, and it was interesting you said about Peele was. I think that will inspire a lot of people to make movies, and like you said before, because a friend of mine, Ebony, who passed away a few years ago, at the convention, a lot of times she thought she was like the only black female that was into horror movies. And I think maybe some people think, well, I might want to make movies, but maybe the horror genre, it's not my place. But I think now that opens it up to a new crop of young black directors to make their own movies. Who are inspired by the success of Jordan Peele.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, that's the thing about when we see that's why representation is so important, and I know, there's always debate, well, why does it matter if you see someone like yourself in a show or whatever like that? But it really does. Studies have shown, like with stem cell research or like women in forensics, one of the things that was shown was that when young girls see themselves in those positions, they feel more prone to go study that in school because they're like, oh, there's someone on television doing this thing. So maybe I can do it too. Same thing like, with the presidency, seeing Obama, it was like, oh, wow, maybe I could be the president one day or things like that. And I think it's the same thing with the horror genre. It's one of those things like for me, seeing Sanaa Lathan in the Alien versus Predator, and there's others before her, but that's one of my favorite movies. So like Sanaa Lathan, and she was the final girl in that, and I loved it. I was like, she's this badass doctor, and she's like, working with Predator to like sling the aliens and things like that. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Black girls can be the final girls in the movie. You don't just have to be the friend that gets killed towards the very end, sacrificing herself for the white girl. We could be the one that actually makes it through the end too. And it makes a big difference, to actually see ourselves. And same thing with, because actually, and I don't know why her name is skipping my head. Jordan Peele is executive producer of Candyman, but I think it's Nia DaCosta.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate she gets overlooked a lot as being the director because people just consider it a Jordan Peele movie.
Exactly. And I mean, I get it. I work in journalism. I know like people print who they print in the name for for search engine, like, oh, that's what people are going to click on because his name is more recognizable. But it's very, it's a great thing to see this, Black woman at the helm of such a horror classic. Candyman is one of those franchises that I play a lot of horror movies in the background when I'm like cleaning and stuff like that. Candyman is one of the movies I can't do that to because it's just so like I can't even like watch it just for fun because it's so chock full of intensity and like just the layers of it. So for her to be able to take the helm of that and like taking it back to Chicago and this idea of like gentrification and change and stuff and applying it to today is awesome. And she definitely deserves hopefully a lot more, exposure and credit for that. Yeah.
And hopefully we get to see the movie, in the theater. I know it should have been out, around this time, but
so much stuff is getting pushed back. I don't know. Although I do think this is helping people discover stuff they wouldn't normally watch. Mm-hmm. That's the silver lining I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Because I saw Killer Sofa for the first time.
I noticed that on your Facebook page. Yeah.
I would have.
You noticed the great Killer Sofa, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have never watched that. Yeah, I would have never watched that had I not, had other things I had to review or whatnot. So, Killer Sofa is actually really good. People should watch it.
All right, I love the cover art. It has me sold already. So.
Yeah. Now that we're stuck in our homes, a Killer Sofa sounds actually terrifying.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. Think about it. Very topical film, The Killer Sofa.
That's social commentary.
That's right. The social commentary of our time.
Gonna get eaten by the sofa.
Right. Along those lines, we're probably going to see a plethora of pandemic horror movies over the next few years. And I'm sure we'll all get sick of them pretty soon. But
yeah, that'll be interesting too, because the whole thing like with Contagion and other films, it was kind of like we hadn't seen it before, right? So it was like these fantastical things that they were taking. I I think it will be interesting to see what filmmakers do with the real actual, like, I don't know, how could you make it more horrific than it is right now, I guess? I don't know.
That people won't want to watch horror, honestly. It's a fear I have, because I think people want to laugh and smile and watch musicals.
Just get escapism from what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm afraid for horror right now. But in the grand scheme of things, it's, I'm afraid of a lot of other things as well.
Yeah.
Horror's down on the list somewhere.
Yeah. There's been a couple of cool things that people have made, while in quarantine, like a couple of anthologies I saw where, all the filmmakers had to make it from like their house. One's Kornstein, which was like a retelling of Frankenstein, so Kornstein, I guess. And and they did it exquisite corpse style, which I didn't know what that meant beforehand, but each person had like one bit and they didn't know like what the other one was, so they had and then they put it together that way. It was actually really cool. And then there was another one, Isolation Horrors from England, and both of them had similar rules. They only could use what was in their house and the cameras they had. So they couldn't go buy anything to make the movies. And there's only like them and like their significant other that lives with them.
I'm waiting for someone to do Snapchat horror or something, like
TikTok
doing a selfie.
Film.
Yeah, a TikTok horror film. There's enough challenges out there. Like every time someone does a TikTok challenge, this monster shows up. They kill everybody.
Maybe we'll steal that idea here.
Yeah, well, speaking to what Trista was saying, like I actually, I think with horror, I don't think necessarily people will turn away from it. I think we'll see maybe different subgenres maybe take off a little bit more. Maybe more horror comedy might be a thing. I feel like there might be more people wanting to kind of have a more lighthearted vibe when it comes to horror. Maybe that might be the thing. Maybe bleak horror might be off the table for a bit, which would be interesting because Ari Aster, like, there are a lot of people, it's very polarizing, love that, and it's very bleak at times. And maybe this might kind of cut that steam a little bit as people move towards maybe something that's not as pessimistic towards the human race.
Right. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that's how we deal, like, speaking like Tales from the Hood, like how much comedy is in that. When we are in real life, the same way that any good drama has comedy, that's how we deal, right? That's how I deal. I deal with comedy. But I also think Midsummer's hilarious to me. I might be in the minority.
Yeah.
It made Trista's top 13 horror comedies we did a show about the other week. I was a little surprised, but when she said it, like, I was like, you know what? It is a pretty funny movie now I think about it.
I laughed, but I guess I felt like I was laughing at the wrong parts. And that's why I was like, is this a good film? Am I supposed to be laughing at certain things? I don't know. I know I have a controversial take on that film, and Hereditary, so I don't want to get any hate. So I'm just gonna
That's fine. I'm actually not a Hereditary fan, but I do like Midsummer quite a bit.
Okay. It was funny. I just didn't think I was supposed to laugh. I don't think he wanted people to laugh. Like,
yeah. That's always interesting. Is it intentional, the laughter and things? Because I actually find some scenes funny in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I know the second one is an overt comedy, but I think there's a lot of comedy in the first movie, though it's really gritty and stuff. Like the chef like poking her, and he's very happy. Maybe I'm just bizarre, but there's some I think intentional comedy in the movie.
Oh yeah, the long shots where it's just like on the face, like some of those scenes go on for so long that you can't help but start to laugh. Where you're just like, wow, like what's happening? Like are we still like just screaming at each other? And they're like screaming back at her and laughing too, and you start laughing too, and it's like, are we all hysterical right now?
Maybe it's a nervous laughter, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Midsummer was just like, yeah, I felt like maybe I should have been under the influence or something. Maybe I would have got it better.
I was totally straight when I watched it, but I'm kind of out there to begin with, I guess. But no, I dug it. So what got you into horror to begin with? What were like the first movies?
Well, my mom tells a story that the first movie she ever took me to, but I was in the stroller, but my brother wanted to see it, was Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And I actually was very afraid of Freddy Krueger for a very early part of my life because when my mom would leave out and my brother would be babysitting me, she'd tell him, don't watch Freddy Krueger, don't watch Nightmare on Elm Street. I grew up with a lot of boys. And so, of course, they're just like practical jokers and stuff like that. So as soon as she left out, he'd watch it. But what he would do is that he'd put the blanket over my head anytime Freddy would come out. So for years, I was having these nightmares about this character that I didn't know what his face looked like, but I knew his like voice. So it would like always take the look of my math teacher or something with like nails and things like that. And I don't know, somewhere along the line there was like just this switch where I went from really being afraid of Freddy to owning like all of the movies. And I don't know if that was some weird kind of I need to conquer this fear kind of a deal, because the first Freddy movie I actually sat through completely was actually New Nightmare, because that was the first Freddy, and that was like a real meta version of him. And I don't, for some reason, once I watched that, I was able to go back to the other films and really just appreciate them more. So, and then from there, I don't know, there was just Killer Clowns from Outer Space is also one of my faves. I started watching a lot of B movies. That's kind of my jam, B movies, like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, things like that.
Killer Sofa.
Killer Sofa,
yeah.
Killer
has
Donuts,
to be the title apparently.
yeah. Zombievers, one of my favorites, Zombie Beavers, and yeah. So yeah, I think I just eventually just kind of dived into it, and then also seeing Wes Craven because he's one of my faves. The way he was taking on certain like aspects, and yeah, from there I just kind of went full throttle, wanted to know the history of stuff, wanted to know more about things, and I started writing my own stories, things like that, when it comes to the writing and the prose aspect. So yeah, just been in love with it ever since. Yeah. There's love-hate aspects, but yeah.
Along the lines we were saying earlier, when did you start to notice like yourself in the movies or someone that looks like you in a horror movie?
In watching, it's actually probably the Friday the 13th films, because there was always a black girl in there somewhere, except for like maybe the first two. And then like the other ones, there would be like one, and we die. But it was kind of like, oh, I'm there, I'm at the camp, and then, with Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, there were the rap. They always had a rap song for Nightmare on Elm Street at the end of it. Uh-huh. Someone was always doing a rap battle. I think Fresh Prince and others. And so it was interesting because I think in the black, and once again, black community is not like a monolith, but it's interesting because one of the not stereotypes, but one of the things that seems prevalent sometimes, it's like the guys tend, like you're either into kung fu movies, like Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that's why, because like in the black community, a lot of boys were into like the kung fu films, and I think that was because of looking at someone who was ethnic as heroes and things like that, and the fantastical thing, or horror, and so yeah, just kind of growing up, I'd see different things. There was Blackula. There were some black exploitation films that my father was really into. I would watch a lot of that stuff. I liked a lot of the black and white stuff, but yeah, I didn't see a lot of myself. That was the thing, and so I guess, I don't know, I guess it was maybe Tales from the Hood and the Leprechaun in the Hood. That was the whole thing. And they weren't always the best versions, but there were a few, like I said, Sanaa Lathan and stuff. I think we could do a lot better, though. I would love to see more Final Girl black girls, but who don't die.
Right. But yeah, just kind of off topic, but when you mentioned A New Nightmare, I don't think it's the best of the franchise, but I do think it's the most underrated movie in the because it asks a really interesting question, like because everyone knows those movies because of Freddy, and like people would have tattoos of Freddy and shirts of Freddy, and it's interesting. I mean, he's the killer in the movie, and if you go back to the first one, he's very heavily hinted that he's a child molester, but he's at the best he's a child killer, but yet he's to a lot of people he's the draw of the movie. I don't say hero, but he's like kind of what people root for. So it was interesting that they took that and kind of flip if you're watching it, you as an audience are kind of asking yourself, why is it that I'm rooting for the killer in these movies?
Yeah, and that's sort of my thing with horror sometimes, to love-hate a little bit, because I do think, like, I have sympathy for, like, Jason Voorhees because of how he died and stuff, but it's like I wouldn't root for Jason throughout the film. But there are some aspects in horror movies where, there is that, like, glorifying of the killer, of the kills themselves. And I guess that's why I was talking earlier with Trista when I was saying, like, my cheesiness of the hope of beating the killer. And that's why, there's certain horror subgenres that I love, and then there's certain ones I'm not the biggest fan of, like Prey at Night. I think it's like Killers Prey at Night or something like that. Where everybody, you just know everyone's gonna die. And it's like, are you watching it for the killers? Like, are you on the killer side? Like, I mean, I can enjoy a monster because I know Freddy got really funny, like Fred is dead and all that. He was really funny. He's like one of the most witty monsters I know, but I never root for him. So I really did appreciate a New Nightmare where it was this question, like, why is he a hero? Like, you guys love, you are all my children. Like, why do you love that? Like, he was questioning that. Like, is it the human you root for? Is it the monster? Like, what's that about? And it's not an easy answer, but because, like, in Pumpkinhead, I root for Pumpkinhead, right? Because he was coming back from these bullies, but then he started killing innocent people. So it's like, no, Pumpkinhead, don't do that. Just kill the people who bullied you. But then it's like, why am I rooting for him killing anybody? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
Horror gets those emotions in us.
Yeah. I always think what was that?
I get on board with revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, I think in some of the slasher movies, if they don't present it where you care about the characters, then it really is a movie where you're just watching to see cool kills. For better, I don't say it's good or bad, but I mean, that's just how the movie, is presented.
Yeah. And I guess, and not to keep going back to Ari Aster, but that was kind of my thing with certain movies where it was like, you have to make me care for these characters. If I don't care for them and they're insufferable or whatnot, like, and I'm going on this journey with them, am I just waiting for their demise? And that just doesn't make me feel good when I watch a horror movie. Like, I'm just waiting for this person to die or the worst possible thing to happen to them. So, that is a thing, but everyone loves what they love with the subgenre. I want someone to put together a personality quiz though, somehow, of like, if you like these certain things, this is the kind of horror fan you are. I think that'd be very interesting.
Craig Lindbergh adds, he says, sometimes a killer is the most fleshed out character. I mean, that's true. I mean, even not just the horror, but true. Like a lot of the Batman villains are more interesting than Batman in the movies.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I think in the movies,
Batman fangirl.
No, I like Batman, but I would think like in a lot of the movies, like a lot of like maybe not so much the newer ones, but I think a lot of the Tim Burton ones. Yeah. It was really more about the Joker and Penguin.
Yeah,
I guess with Batman, you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have an interesting hero and villain.
Yeah, I mean, no, I totally get what you're saying, because there is a thing of, and you kind of wonder, is that a shortcoming of the storyteller, or is that what the storyteller was going for? Did they want me to care more and identify more with the monster? Is this who is the star of this franchise? Or is it, the humans that they face off against? So, sometimes they are the most fleshed out. Like, Pumpkinhead's backstory of being this, child who was, taken advantage. I can't watch it sometimes. I feel a certain way. And like, even with the new Chucky movie that, when Mark Hamill was doing the voice, I couldn't finish it because I was like, I care too much about Chucky at this moment. I was like, this is not how it's supposed to be. I should not care. Like, he was, to me, I felt like there was something, he was a child, and there was something that, yes, like there was something wrong, and he just was learning bad things. And I was like, there's no way I can finish this film knowing where this is going. I'm like, I can't do it.
There's a great scene in that movie which I wish they would have explored more, and I actually liked the movie, but I think it could have been great. Is when Chucky is watching horror movies with the rest of the kids, and they're all laughing at the horror, and I'm like, he realizes that they enjoy the horror, and I think that's what motivates him to start killing people, because he thinks the kids would like it. And so I'm like, he's not trying to be a bad guy. He's actually trying to entertain all his friends.
And then he gets reprimanded and he feels so bad. I turned it off actually I was like, I cannot do this. I can't. I was like, I care too much for this Chucky version of him. You know, I need the old version where he sounded like a New Yorker type, like, you know, I'm going to kill you. Like, I'm like, that's the Chucky I can watch. I can't watch this new guy because I want him to be redeemed somehow. And we know that's not what's going to happen. And that's going back to what we were saying. Like, to me, I thought that was a little bit of a failure on the storyteller's part, on the scriptwriter's part, because I was like, well, you know, you put yourself in a corner here. I don't think of myself as a special snowflake. I'm pretty sure I can't be the only person that kind of cares about this character now. And I'm wondering if I care about the kids that are making fun of him. I don't want that, you know? That brought up more emotions. I could not finish that.
I'm glad you brought up Pumpkinhead, because Pumpkinhead is, I don't know if you can see him, but he is on my hand-painted top hat.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's so cool.
It's full of all my favorite monsters.
I love that.
Including Pumpkinhead.
That's
awesome. Do you wear that?
Yeah, when I used to host panels a lot, I would wear that hat.
Cool.
Awesome hat.
That is.
I'll bring it next time I'm in LA, maybe. It's very hot, though, is the only problem.
Yeah, I can man top hat, yeah. No way.
Craig says the villains cannot be held to logical or they can be as over as top as needed. Along those lines, I think, to me, a best villain is a villain who, in their own mind, is doing what they think is right or what is needed, you know. They're not a villain in their own mind.
As someone who... sorry, Chauncey, go on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So as someone who sometimes plays villains, I approach the work the same way I do when I'm playing, you know, a good person. You're right. It's they're convicted in their mind and heart, I think. And I think that's true in life. Go on.
No, I was totally just going to echo, but you're like the actress. So of course that makes a lot of sense. Like, cause I was saying like, you know, I think one of the things, it's like when you portray it, you're taught to like, you know, trained to kind of believe, you have to kind of be rooting for your character in a way, right? Like you have to kind of have this conviction that I'm right to do this, even if it's outside of the morals of society or whatever, that I have a mission here. And I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't feel like it'd be believable if a villain didn't believe that there was if there wasn't some sort of weird passion behind a character. I mean, even with Jason, like I get why he goes after the camp counselors, right? It's like,
they killed his mom.
They killed his mom.
Or even the mom in the first one, you know.
Yeah,
she's getting revenge for her son.
I mean, you don't necessarily like want her to win out, but you understand why she's doing it. You understand why Jason does it later. And that was one of the great things about, I've come around to having a more fondness for Friday the 13th franchise. Jason X is actually one of my favorite movies too. I don't think that gets enough credit for how funny and aware Jason X is. But one of the things, like they do these moments when Jason dies where he has those, like that childhood trauma comes back. And you're like when Jason goes to New York, which was like all of 20 minutes of him in New York.
Right.
But
it's on a boat, and then he was in New York for a couple minutes walking around.
And like he has the moments where he's afraid of water. And in that moment, you kind of care. You're like, oh, man, like, you know, this is why he did this. Because it's like...
Then he turns into a kid at the end, and then the next movie's an adult again, which I don't understand.
No, there's outside of the realm of logic. Like,
right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Make too much logic out of it, I guess. I'm sorry to interrupt you with foolishness. But.
No, I agree with you. I agree. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. That I will say once again, I don't want to get hate for it, but like I will say, like to me, I always like Jason's continuity, even though it's not so straightforward.
Like
I always
in the first four, like the movies really go together. Like that's like one long story.
And even when they made him undead, like even when they made him undead, they picked a spot. I feel like that's not necessarily the case with Michael Myers sometimes, you know.
Oh, no, they go all over the place.
What is his origin? Is he a demon? Is he human?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is he your brother? Is he not her brother? In the first two, he's the brother. Then in the direct sequel, he's no longer the brother. Yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought it'd be fun. This is a dumb idea, but to tell like a campfire tale of like a whole franchise of movies but you have to use all of them. So try to connect them in some kind of strange story. Like, so you start with Jason, with the mom, and then you lead up to him going to New York and out and getting shot in outer space. And I don't know why this appeals to me.
That would sound ridiculous. Like
yeah.
No, I think that's a great idea. That would sound, because they would end up sounding very ridiculous in a lot of instances.
Right.
Like,
you have to try to do it as serious as possible. Right.
Exactly. Or someone did like the Leprechaun franchise, like where Leprechaun's in the hood. Then he goes back to the hood.
Yeah.
For his gold.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the franchise always have trouble when they go to space, but you like Jason X, so maybe I'm incorrect. I don't know.
I felt like it was in the realm of what New Nightmare was, but less serious.
Yeah, it actually has an interesting
really
idea,
aware.
Mm-hmm.
It was so aware, right? It was so aware, like, and also Jason X has one of the best kills of the franchise in there.
The frozen head
face.
is pretty sweet. Yeah.
That's one of the best kills. But like, I mean, I don't know. I just felt like it was so aware of itself, like whole Final Girl play on that, the whole if someone dies, the black guy kind of making it towards the end, kind of being there. Like there was a lot there. I know people hate on it.
Well, I'll be honest. Some of those movies, when I rewatch them now, like I never liked Jason Goes to Hell, and I watched it recently for an interview, and I was like, it's so just crazy. Like I actually enjoy it. Just I can't necessarily say it's a good movie, but I enjoy it. So I guess that makes it good. But it was totally insane.
It was gross to me. I don't know. I felt like they appealed they leaned a little too much on the body horror than like what Jason's for, which is a slasher.
Yeah, well, he's not even like Jason in the movie. He's like a worm that's going into people. I don't know.
And then he swims up someone's legs to be reborn, and I'm like, okay, all right. I'm done. Yeah. That's fine.
And the Necronomicon's there. They're connecting them to like the Evil Dead movies, and it's
right though with the sword. Like what?
Yeah. By the way, when we talk about the villains, I always think Evil Dead's the one franchise where it's all about the hero. It's all about Ash. I think I could be wrong, but I think that's the only like the big franchise with a lot of sequels. It's about the hero, not the villain.
Wow.
I guess Phantasm to a lesser degree with Reggie, but you also have the tall man in that. And I think it's Ash.
I think you're right. Yeah, I don't think I know any other one that really was focused. So like where the guy was the hero.
I mean, the villains look cooler, right? In general.
Yeah, but he's the consistency. He's the thing that's in all of them is Ash, as opposed to Jason or Freddy or Leatherface.
Right.
They tried that with Michael Myers. They tried that with Halloween. No one liked it, I guess. Although I liked the third one.
It's weird. When I was a kid, I was like the only person. Now I do see like more people are into it, but I think the third one's crazy. I love it. I think it's my favorite sequel. I don't think it's better than the first movie, but it's my favorite of the sequels.
Yeah. No, I guess you're right about Ash. Trying to think, can't think of anyone else.
Who doesn't love the jingle from 8 More Days to Halloween? 8 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. 8 more days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. I mean,
and just the fact that they took it there with like kids getting killed, like that scene was so long when the kid made like all the stuff. I'm like, wow, this kid's 12. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's usually taboo in most. Early on it was taboo. Now they just kill them willy nilly, like Hereditary. But like, it was kind of taboo to be killing kids early on. Yeah,
especially with bugs coming out of their eyes and ears and
in such a graphic way.
Yeah. I read like a fan theory how they connected that one to the other movies because they said that the company Silver Shamrock that makes the mask in Part 3, that maybe they made the original mask that Michael wears, the clown mask in the first movie where he kills his sister. And that was like their prototype. And I was like, it's actually kind of an interesting theory to connect all the movies.
But then how do they explain someone actually watching Halloween in the third one?
I mean, it's not that involved. You just destroyed this person's theory. Very sad now.
I didn't mean to.
It's meta, just like Jason X.
It's meta!
Right. That's how we could explain it. So, have you seen... Oh, go on, sorry.
Scream. Sidney Prescott. That's sort of...
Oh, that's a good one.
Because this killer's always different.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though it is, Ghostface, but the hero is the same hero throughout the movies. That's a good one. I didn't.
Hopefully, she's coming back for the new one. Hopefully, she's coming back.
Oh yeah, they are making a new one, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For better or worse. I mean, we don't know. So many remakes.
Yeah,
just don't make it like Chucky.
You don't want to save her and hold her and keep her forever,
right?
You want to save Ghostface and the.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what if he just has a monologue where he talks about what's in the mask? And I'm just like, no. He needs therapy, not death.
I kind of like that in horror because my favorite's Frankenstein, and I feel connected to Frankenstein, and he's not really a monster. He just can't live in our world, so it's a very sad.
No, I agree with you. I got Frankenstein up there, but I feel like that was the more overt one, right? Where the monster was the science, where it's like...
Yeah, underrated monster is Dr. Frankenstein. I don't think he gets enough credit for being a great villain.
Yeah. The monster is... And I feel like that's the sort of thing with some horror movies when they play that thing where, like, the actual monster isn't the actual, like, physical threat outside. It's the people, which I think it was Day of the Dead that kind of played on that too, which was the one where they were down in the military.
Yeah, Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead. And that played on the whole thing. Yeah, there were zombies out there, but a lot of the damage that was done was from people not wanting to listen to commands. And here we are. Really
all three of them. It's a progression. The first one, it's the people fighting in the house, not, wanting to work together. Mm-hmm. One guy's like, we got to go downstairs and won't let them downstairs when they want to go down there. And then the second one of the people invading, they get it all set up in the mall, and they could just live there. But then the people have to come and destroy that.
Yeah.
So it's always the people who ruin it for everybody.
Yeah.
Now,
that's the whole thing about horror, doing that sort of that subversion.
Have you seen Horror Noir? It's on Shudder currently.
Yeah.
What did you think of Horror Noir?
Oh yeah, I liked it. I mean, it's great that it had some highlights of I was actually supposed to be in that, but like it was it had a lot of like highlights. Like no, it's fine. It had a lot of great highlights, and of course, it's always great Tony Todd and like just the history of Black excellence in horror and the ways it's come. So yeah, I appreciate it. And hopefully there'll be more, things that dive into the different aspects of our involvement in the genre. Yeah.
From I understand, I don't know if it's true or not, but they're going to be doing another one like that, but it'll be about the LGBT community, but a documentary on Shudder. I
heard that too. Yeah, I heard that too.
So let's see here.
I mean, it's necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. Craig Lundberg adds he loves Halloween 3 as well. Peter Cushing is a good hero. I mean, Peter Cushing's great, but he's not like a hero in a franchise. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up, Chauncey? And how can people follow what you're doing?
I just love, thanks Trista for letting me and let Neal and I love talking horror and just all the layers of it, even controversial things that I say occasionally that people don't like when it comes to certain things I enjoy with it. But I have a YouTube channel, Twisted Woman CKR, where I do horror and dark fantasy reviews. Also, all my reviews can be found on Rotten Tomatoes as well, written and video, as I'm a Rotten Tomatoes film and TV critic. And I just started a website, that Final Girl Survival, that deals with kind of the survivalist prepping sort of self-defense, but with the, inspiration from Final Girls of like cinema and real history, kind of pushing that genre, using my love of that to kind of inspire why I think people should be prepared when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
So, it's finalgirlsurvival.com. So people want to check that out. Yeah.
That could be a good 13 for us sometime, the 13 favorite Final Girls.
Yeah.
We could do a list of that sometime.
Cool.
Yeah. Trista, where can people follow you?
Oh, I'm Trista Robinson. I post updates about my work on Facebook and Twitter.
Very good. Well, this was cool. I enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add, Trista?
Thank you. It was great to see you again.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was nice
same.
to meet you
Hopefully,
virtually.
yeah, for sure. And hopefully, I mean, I don't know. Shriek Fest is supposed to be having its 20th year, so I don't know if it's like, because it usually happens in September or October, but with everything going on. But we are still. I'm a judge this year at Shriek Fest, which is awesome. But so people are still doing submissions and everything, so people can check that out, I guess.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to look at what's on your wall there now that you mentioned Frankenstein. We got Beetlejuice.
Yeah, Beetlejuice. I'm a comic book fan too, so there's more stuff on other. What was that?
Do you have Power Rangers?
Yeah, I have a signed picture. Power Rangers, because I am also a Power Ranger fan. I admit that. There's some Birds of Prey and other stuff. I actually have Chucky on the wall here. See, I do. See, I'm a Chucky man. I have a very large Chucky blanket on the wall here. Bride of Chucky that says "See you in hell." So I like the more rough Chucky. I can't. I just want to hug Mark Hamill's Chucky.
I'm a Brad Dourif fan, so
okay.
Yeah, I like the OG Chucky too.
Yes. Yeah.
Fair enough. It might spoil next week or so, but Trista, if you were to have something in the background, what would it be?
Yeah.
Like if there were posters just to pop up from your mind, what would be up there?
Oh, like movie posters?
Yeah, or anything. It could be Power Rangers if you want to.
I might have like
you could sell Chauncey's posters, or borrow them.
Like the little kitten hanging off the rope, and it says "Hang in there."
Oh, that's very cute. I like that.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll try to Photoshop that in.
Thank you.
Very well. Very well. Well, again, thanks everyone for doing this, Chauncey and Trista.
Thank you.
We'll do it again sometime if everyone is into it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right.
This is a great discussion.
Yeah, very good. And thank everyone for watching. Sorry there's some technical problems to begin with, but I think it all worked out.